Can your family manage to hire talented artists to build the most magnificent district in Florenza?
Hey guys, and thanks for joining us at Teach from House Studio 3. I'm Will Meadows.
And I'm Sara Meadows, and today we're reviewing a game from Placentia Games called Florenza, the dice game. This is from designer Danilo Festa.
It's a 1 to 4 player roll and write game that takes about an hour to play. We bought this copy at Essen, and we're going to take a look at how it's played.
To make playing the game easier, give each player 2 game sheets to use one side of each.
Place the board in the center of the table and have each player roll a die to determine their starting building, and then you're ready to begin.
The player with the lowest die roll begins by rolling all the dice and placing them on the board. They will select 3 dice to use. All other players will simultaneously select one of the remaining dice.
Each die grants the player one of 3 items to select. The number determines the row, and the player may select to gain a resource, recruit a person, or gain fiorini.
Resources can be marked anywhere on the sheet. Once a player has enough resources to complete a work of art, they may commission an artist to create that work of art.
Buildings may also be built using resources, and each offers a benefit as soon as it is constructed.
The captain, bishop, or preacher may be recruited as well for additional aid along each track.
Once all players have taken a turn, a new round begins and income is gained if players have constructed sections of the chiesa or church.
The personality tracks are compared, and the player who has influenced the captain and bishop will gain their powers for the round.
Play continues, and once all the rounds have been played, points are tallied, and the player with the most prestigious Renaissance family wins the game. Florenza is a pretty meaty roll and write game. It's actually probably one of the heavier ones that I've played. That's a great thing. I really did enjoy it. There's a lot of decision making in it, like a lot of the ones we've played. I'm not sure if it was because of the theme that they were going for, but I felt unfamiliar with a lot of the words and the terms and the icons in the game, which made it just a little bit less approachable. That's not a bad thing because it does have that antiquated Renaissance feel to it, which was nice. So I think they did great on the theme, but it is going to take you a little while to just understand the rules, how the game plays, what all the boxes do. But it did check a lot of boxes for me in the gameplay experience.
Yes, in the game you are gaining resources. You have that 3 choices on your turn to make for choosing your dice. Those dice all also have 3 things you could gain from them: the resources, having a person help you, or the money. So depending on what you need, you aren't limited to do those things in a certain order. You can create whatever you'd like on your board and mark things off in whatever order you would like. So I did like that freedom. On your turn, you also, once you build something or complete a work of art, you gain any benefits from that immediately as well. So you might be able to mark a couple boxes off, gain something, or complete something, and then in that same turn start using that benefit to finish out your turn and use the rest of the items that you're going to gain.
Yeah, some nice chaining going on for sure. One of the other interesting things is that you're using the back side of the sheet, or as we've been doing it, is a separate sheet to play the game. So you have this huge variety of additional buildings that you can build, so everybody can kind of have a totally different strategy in the game. A lot of them use the same resources, so it's not necessarily like one building is going to be easier to get than another. It really does come down to how you want to, what effects you want to take advantage of, because you can kind of build any of, I don't even know, 15, 12, there's a bunch of buildings on the back that you can then plug into the front of your, 20, in the front of your game, so you could really have a very different experience every time you play it.
Yes. In the games that we've played, the player count may come into play a little bit more for the higher player counts because you have more turns that you're waiting where you don't get to select everything, and then you're going to play fewer rounds. And so that does change up the gameplay a little bit. I know on the higher player counts, when I played 4 players a couple of times, there were 1 or 2 rounds where I needed a very specific artist, and I had planned on gaining some income in the next couple of rounds, and those artists were taken up by whoever's turn it was, so I couldn't even gain that stuff. So I had to really rethink and re-strategize halfway through a round to try and, what am I going to do instead? Fortunately, there's a lot of things you can do instead, and there are lots of places where you can use those resources, and especially the backside of that sheet where you can build any one of those buildings. You can kind of reconfigure what your plan was if things get thwarted in the middle of a round.
Yeah, in the lower player count games, I definitely felt like the resources were pretty rich. You've got a lot of coins that you can be adding to your bank to spend at any point later in the game. Same goes with those wild or whatever the resource token is. That means you can have any resource. You can kind of stack a bunch of those up, and then sometimes you can build a building, she said that earlier, in a whole turn, because you just say, yep, I need, red silk and 5 other different things, and I'm just going to use resource to fill those voids. So you can do some quick building sometime, and I liked that I felt like I had plenty of resources in the smaller player count to really take advantage and build whatever I felt would be most optimized for my set collection.
I did have a couple of negative things about the game. It is very difficult to learn compared to some of the other roll and writes, especially. I feel like the rule book could have been laid out a little bit differently or presented the information a little bit differently, because it did take me a time or 2 reading through to figure out what you actually did on your turn and what you were supposed to be marking off. When I taught it to other players, they picked it up pretty quickly, even though there was a lot to digest. But for it being a heavier roll and write, I did enjoy the gameplay overall. One other thing is it was a little muddy as to how you were supposed to mark your sheet for all those buildings on the back side. It has places where you're supposed to mark ahead if you gain resources, and the ones that you allocate to that building slot, say it's in slot 2, if you mark that you're adding silver and silk, then you have to build a building that's going to gain or need those things, or you end up wasting them. So what you allocate to each of those building slots, and you can work ahead, but if you don't plan well, then you may end up wasting resources.
Planning is definitely crucial in the game. It's definitely, like we said, a little bit more to think about than some of the other roll and writes we've played. Definitely a crunchy, chunky, great chewy, lots of eating words opportunity. If it looks like something you would enjoy, be sure to check out Florenza. And then, as always, thanks so much for subscribing to Tantrum House.
Influential, I said most twice.
Magnificent.
I wish I would have had this for my top 10 roll and writes video, because it probably would have been in my top 3. Dice game from Placentia Games, from Placentia Games. I didn't see, you jumped in way too soon
Because you changed the word.
Each player 2 game sheets used in front and back of each. No.
Not true. 4-player meaty and chunkily